As we get closer to the medium-term budget policy statement, and we catch up now with our reporter, Nompumelelo Siziba. Nompu, good morning to you. Those preparations underway. I can see all the activity behind you there. Who have you got and what are you hearing at the City Hall?
We're live here at the City Hall in Cape Town, awaiting Finance Minister Enoch Godongwana's midterm budget speech, where of course we want to hear how government is going to deal with the situation of the fact that revenue is coming much slower than was anticipated in the February budget, and spending has ballooned out of control, with National Treasury advising government departments to begin to taper on their spending where they can, putting moratoriums on new jobs and asking for cuts in terms of travel expenses and many other expenses because there's just not enough revenue coming in. And then the problem comes in that government is now having to go out to the market to borrow more money just to fill the gaps in terms of the spending that it needs to achieve, and it means that our debt burden as a country is growing. This is unlikely to be a sustainable situation and one that needs urgent attention. To discuss this further, I'm joined by Christy Villion. He's an economist at PwC. He's kindly joined us before he heads into the lockup, where you'll be reading a ream of pages telling us about the midterm budget. Christy, this is quite a serious situation. The sustainability of government finances. How concerned are you, and what are the key areas of concern for you?
So the big issue at the moment is that we are looking at a big gap in tax revenue compared to what government was thinking they would be getting. And somehow you have to make that up, either by cutting spending, increasing borrowing, or lifting tax rates. Now that tax rates is the last option, and government will probably look at some spending cuts, a little bit of extra borrowing. That's what the finance minister has been saying. But the key is, where does he get that money from? Where do you make sure that government services can continue to be delivered without necessarily having to go borrow a lot more money, which is quite expensive at this stage?
So is it possible for the government to cut spending without then undermining its developmental priorities?
I'm thinking what the finance minister said is he's going to go look at where spending is not happening. And that actually means where are departments getting a budget, but they're not spending all of that money. It's going to take some of that back. Where money is not going to be spent, he's going to redirect it. So ideally, he doesn't have to cut spending. He would probably look at where money is not available or where money is not being used, and then redirecting that to important services like healthcare, education, because those social services specifically, you don't want to cut that spending.
It's been very unusual to have a finance minister speaking so openly and candidly about the public finances in the run-up to the midterm budget, which he's been doing. Just the other week, or just the other day, on Friday, I think, he was speaking at a Kgalema Motlanthe Foundation summit, and he was talking about the fact that something needs to be done in terms of cutting expenditure, but he may consider borrowing more money in order not to cut expenditure to the degree that was originally proposed by National Treasury. But surely that strategy is problematic, because it means we get into more debt, and then we're going to have to spend more on debt servicing costs, which means we crowd out the other important things that we need to spend on, like education, policing, the social wage, etc.
I think the reason why the minister has been so vocal is because this time round it's difficult to borrow more. In the past, we've seen income gaps. It's not unusual. It's happened before. But what's happening now is it's getting more expensive and more difficult to borrow more money. Also, our debt is already very high. So in a perfect world, he wouldn't want to do that. So he's making sure he's sending signals before the budget, raising the red flag to say, listen, the budget is going to have to be very serious about how we manage our money. So he's been preparing us for a while to say there might be some critical announcements. He also, in this messaging, wants to make sure that government departments understand the seriousness of it. Because even though he's made requests for spending to be cut back, we haven't seen that. So he's using all of his avenues to say this is a serious financial situation, and the budget is going to have to make some serious choices, because we can't just go borrow more money all the time. It's eating up all of our money to just pay the interest. We rather need that money that's going to interest to build hospitals, build schools, build roads.
It's funny, every year we always talk about the finance minister being between a rock and a hard place, but really he isn't between a rock and a hard place now, because he's having to convince his colleagues in government departments to cut spending. It's not happening, as you say. How difficult or easy will it be for the ANC ruling party to be able to make the right economic decisions for South Africa Inc. in an election year?
Well, we often get that question when elections are coming up. What's government finances going to do given that there's an election? And across the world we see this, where sometimes governments respond just before an election with changes in their policy so that they look good. They try and get more votes. And to be very honest, in South Africa, we don't really see these kinds of election budgets. And I think the reason for that is that most parties would be campaigning for socioeconomic development, poverty alleviation. That is already at the core of government spending and government policy and fiscal policy. So the election is really not a big concern when it comes to this medium-term statement or the main budget in Feb, because we are already focused on the key priorities. So I'm not really concerned about that point. We probably won't see any significant shift in policy or priorities. It's going to come down to the rands and cents and how that gets moved around.
Thank you very much, Christy, for your time. I'm going to let you go because I know you have to go to lock up. That was Christy Viljoen. He's an economist at PwC. Government really, National Treasury really in a difficult spot as it's not getting enough revenue coming in, and government departments continue to spend at a rapid pace, at a faster pace than the money's coming into the fiscus. The debt is rising. We understand that National Treasury has gone up many times, several fold, in going to the market to borrow more money, from 2 billion rand a week to 14 billion rand a week. Not sure how much of an exaggeration that is, but indeed there's been an increase in debt issuances, and this is not sustainable. Christy talked about government not really changing the wheel that much, but of course one issue that is of importance is the social relief of distress grant.
Right.
We heard from the Finance Minister, that is only budgeted for until the end of March 2024, and that costs the government around 36 billion rand per annum. So we'll have to wait and see whether he makes an announcement around that and where that 36 billion rand plus is going to come from.